Like, that's the thing. No matter what it is, everybody's doing it wrong.
Always for no mind.
Is Ujian? Now I want to put an umlaut in my name. Yeah.
It's not working very well for you.
Yeah, I know, but still, I want it to happen. If we can change my name for DT Live
You
tomorrow.
could put it in your last name very easily.
Nubler.
Nubler.
Nubler. Oh no,
I
that's
think that exists.
that's my alter
I
ego
know,
name.
that's your Craig.
That's Craig's name. We don't talk about Craig on this show. Hello, everyone. This is Trends with Benefits. This is our weekly roundtable podcast here at Digital Trends, where we talk about a trending tech topic. We analyze it. We give you our thoughts and opinions on it. And we also take yours as well, because we're broadcasting live on Facebook, on YouTube, on the Digital Trends live page, which I know so many of you have joined up on that. We're really looking forward to having you all there as part of that conversation. Another YouTube channel right there. So thanks to everybody who's on there. And I see a lot of comments coming through. So we're on there. We're also on Twitter. Also, thank you to everybody who's joining us today. So we're going to be talking about something that is a little bit serious, but we feel like there's no way to avoid this. So originally, the topic this week was going to be about MWC, Mobile World Congress. We're going to be covering everything that's going on with that and all of the announcements that are happening with it. And you know what? There are no announcements because it got canceled. And that is because of the fears of the coronavirus and what's happening with that. And the Caleb's. I'm trying to do this very serious intro.
Right in the middle.
It's time to giggle. Oh God, this is such a serious topic.
It's such a serious topic, and
It
it's
is.
not worth laughing about. I'm
No.
laughing about something completely different, and I'm
for the
crying,
record.
and I feel like
You know
I need
what?
to tell the world.
It's all right because that's fine. We're gonna talk about it, and we're gonna just address
Sorry.
part of the issues with it. So there's a lot of tech behind it, and there's a lot of things that go beyond that too. So I just want to say at the very beginning, we understand what a giant humanitarian crisis this is, and you know that's a very important thing. We're going to talk about that side of it, but we're also we're a tech show, so we're going to talk about the tech angles and different ways that's affected, but also how it can change things and actually do things better. So we're going to get into all that here. And let's start it off right now. We're going to introduce our cast of characters. I'm Greg Nibbler. To my right.
I am Adrienne Warner, a.k.a. Hot Nozzle.
Hot
Nozzle.
There she is. All right. And on the end here.
Caleb Dennison, a.k.a. The Whiskey Mist, a.k.a. Chicken Bone, a.k.a. Lecture or Laughing Leb, depending on how the things go for the next few minutes.
So Caleb's going to be giving us some history lessons here, and that's because Drew is not here.
Professor Prindle is not in the house
Professor
right
Prindle's in Germany. We don't get to get his history lesson, but Caleb will fill in just fine. And replacing Drew here this week, we have none other than Mr. Jeremy Kaplan.
Jeremy Kaplan. I don't have a nickname, so let's call me Cold Nozzle.
Cold Nozzle.
Cold
Ooh.
Nozzle, hot and cold.
I like it. All right.
Just seems to make sense.
Sure.
At the end, there's got to be some kind of a fight, though. But all right.
We'll
Cold
face it.
nozzle, hot nozzle, going back and forth, one-on-one. Let's get started on this. So talking about the coronavirus, I just have to give like a little bit of information just to get us going here so we have the background on it. And here's one of the things. You know, obviously starting in China, this is where it actually originated from. That's where it's being affected the most. Wuhan City, Hubei province in China. It does have a new name now. Actually, technically, it's not the coronavirus anymore. So this is something that was just recently changed. It's now called the COVID-19 virus. So that's probably a name that you're going to be seeing more. So that's some news, actually, that's just kind of happened. So they switched it to that. So you'll be seeing that as of right now, 60,000 cases confirmed, although I don't believe that number because China keeps changing it. And right now, about 1,300 deaths. So out of those that have been confirmed cases and reported deaths. So we don't know for sure. It's all over the world. Pretty much every continent has some cases of it. But trying to maintain it, or contain it, rather, is one of the big issues. And that's why MWC got canceled, because you have everybody coming in from, I don't know, 200 plus countries, 100,000 people, all in one nice giant, mixing pot where everybody can spread it if it happens.
So once a year, we all get back from CES, and literally half the staff has the flu,
Yeah.
or some sort of a cold, because this is how that stuff gets spread. You have a group of people that come in from around the world with their little colds and their little sniffles, and
Right.
you just hand it around.
It puts a whole new meaning to the phrase tech incubator.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Well said.
It's like, okay, great. You're going to get an Indonesian flu. I'm going to give them an American cold.
Yeah, and
everybody
and even with a
shares.
no handshake policy, I mean, you're crossing paths, you're bumping into each other. There's just very little way to avoid it.
Yeah, and that's what they had talked about. Well, we'll get into the MWC side of things here in a second. But going back even further, Caleb here, filling in for Professor Prindle, wanted to give us a little bit more of a historical context.
I am going to try, yeah. And by the way, I should point out, wow, that is... For those
Pat
of you
and
watching
Caleb.
along, that is.
If
that
you're
is
watching the
absolutely
podcast,
amazing.
there's a new graphic that is up for Captain Caleb.
They extend my neck for that?
Your neck is enormous.
It is a very large neck. That is not.
Adam's apple seems to be leaning a little to
I
the
don't know.
right.
I'm not sure if that's, if that measures up in real life, but we'll let people leave that to their
What are you
imagination.
trying to do to me? Apparently, coronavirus is sort of a description for a group of viruses.
Yeah, it's similar to the rhinovirus.
Right, but I mean, it's so named because it appears to have like little spires, like a crown, when you look at the virus. So I guess SARS also was technically a type of coronavirus.
One of those kinds of
Yeah,
viruses.
I'm not sure everybody was aware of that. But anyway, let's go to the history. Let's do a top 8 pandemics. Run down the list. The hottest 8 pandemics of world history. I was not aware that there were so many. So as I did this research, I was like, wow, we have been through some stuff as humanity.
Right.
And it actually kind of helps put coronavirus in perspective a little bit.
I mean, it's all relevant. It's not the topic you want to have. It's
No.
the topic that we have.
But let's
you
run
know?
down a few of them. I have 8. I don't know that I'm going to have time to go through all of them. But the first big recorded one was the Antonine Plague in 165 AD. So we're going way back, right? And it was responsible for 5 million deaths. And it affected Asia, Egypt, Greece, and Italy. And it basically wiped out the Roman army when it made it to
Wow.
Mesopotamia.
Interesting.
It kind of wiped out the Roman army. That was a big one. They don't know actually what it was. Scholars think it was smallpox or measles, but they don't know for sure. So there's some mystery to that one, which I thought was kind of intriguing. Next up would be the plague of Justinian. And that was responsible for 25 million deaths.
Wow.
And that was bubonic plague.
Okay.
That's when bubonic chronic came around, and I think I read it at its worst. Just in the city of Constantinople, it was killing an estimated 5,000 people per day until it wiped out 40% of the city's population. So getting a really big hold and really wiping people out. And we weren't equipped to battle against it. Everything was cool for about 800 years, and then the bubonic plague came back as the Black Death pandemic in 1346. So we had a nice little space before it got hit again.
Yeah.
That killed 75 to 200 million people, which is a really wide range. So obviously it's not accurate, but it's at least triple what the previous pandemic did. So reaching more people, also killing more people. We're not battling against it very well.
Yeah, higher
Transmission
density.
exactly. Transmission for that was blamed on fleas that lived on rats, which got on merchant ships and spread it all over the world.
So again,
Fabric.
that fear of things spreading.
Yeah.
You know?
The next one on the list, just because it had its impact in 1852, so we're getting to some relatively modern history, was the third cholera pandemic, which tells you there was more than one. No, there were 7 cholera pandemics, which was a really big problem. I left off the 6th off the list because I think one cholera pandemic is enough for us to talk about.
Yeah.
But I put this one on here because it was considered the most deadly. 1 million. That's down significantly from 75 to 200 million. So moving in the right direction. And by the time they figured out that it was contaminated water, it was already a huge mess. 1854, I think, was the worst year. 23,000 people in Britain died, which not good. And then we get our first influenza in 1889. Oh, our first influenza.
I remember it well.
It was a warm spring.
Yeah, it was a Christmas present. My first influenza. And, we hear a lot about H1N1. This was influenza A, H2N2, and that's when they really started categorizing them.
Yeah.
They called it Asiatic flu or Russian flu. And it went through Asia, Canada, and Greenland, and kind of descended on humanity from there. And it really got around. The next flu pandemic was 1918, so now we're into this just the past century, and that hit us hard. 20 to 50 million dead from that one.
That was the Spanish flu, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's. Let me double
Or maybe
check
I'm wrong
that.
on that. Sorry. I will
You know your
interject.
flus.
I remember that one. I remember reading that one.
No, I don't know. I don't know that this was
Okay.
the Spanish flu, but it killed a third of the world's population, ending the
third.
lives
Wow.
of 20 to 50
Holy
million
cow.
people.
Flus are no joke.
Yeah.
This is why everyone is
It was a really high rate of death too. Was the thing, between 10 and 20%. So you got it. It was probably really bad news for you. Asian flu came around in 1956. World Health Organization says 2 million people died from that, and that also originated in China. We're kind of starting to see a trend here, quite frankly. Asia, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, a lot of it births there and then spreads from there. The next flu pandemic was in 1968, 1 million people dead. That was called the Hong Kong flu, and that was H3N2. Not that it matters, but that put the herd on. It only took 17 days for it to just absolutely take over
Wow.
the world. 17 days in 68, where air travel was not nearly as prevalent and dense as it is right now, which should make you a little bit concerned about where we're at right now. And then the next pandemic was actually HIV/AIDS, which obviously we know a lot about that. That came out of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Let me try that again. Democratic Republic of Congo in 1976, and it's killed more than 36 million people. It's still around today, obviously, but we've learned how to deal with it. And now the mortality rate is way, 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 way down. But it did, again, birth somewhere, spread all over the world, thus is a global pandemic. And that takes us to modern day.
Yeah. Well, I think that's important to take a look at that, like the history side of that, because what it says is pandemics are inevitable. Like, that's going to happen in nature. Those things are going to happen. And that, I think, kind of brings us to this current day because...
Well, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
One of the takeaways that I'm just coming to my mind as I'm thinking about these things is where we've come in the modern era is we're a lot better at diagnosing how the disease actually is propagated between individual people. With some of those historical ones, the issue was just nobody knew what was going on.
Right.
Was it water? Was it rats? Am I sleeping on my head and that's causing this problem? So we're a lot better about knowing the cause of these things today, which doesn't make it any easier to solve them, right? We still have to go through this process of coming up with an antivirus or isolating whoever's infected or whatever. Addressing the issue is still just as challenging.
Yeah, and that's 100%. And knowing, I guess that getting it to that point, to the current point, that knowledge of knowing how things spread, or at least having an idea of how it could spread. Because even with coronavirus, they're not entirely sure yet. At least according to everything I've read, it could be 14 days that you're carrying it around. That's what they're estimating, which is a long time.
Yeah, that's a really long incubation period for any symptoms to be showing. So that kind of really puts the emphasis on restricting all of this travel, is because once you're exposed, and if you don't have any symptoms for up to 2 weeks, there's so many places you could go in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and think of all the people that you talk to, that you interact with, and you could be potentially each person, which is why there was a lot of things that were shut down when it came to travel. We're going to get into the travel side here in just a second too, but just to give a little more context on MWC, because again, we're a tech company, and this is a big cancellation. Like, to cancel the largest smartphone convention, and it's way beyond that, but in the world, in Barcelona, that's just to give you the fiscal reaction to that. It's worth about $500 million to the Barcelona economy every year. That's what they're estimating, like $100 million just to local vendors alone. So that's a big economic impact that has all kinds of ramifications. But the fear was that you get all these people together from all over the world, and then they're all going to pass it on to each other for a few days, and then they've got a 14-day incubation period, and then boom, they're out in the world. Everybody goes home.
I was talking about this with Andy Boxall, one of our writers, who has some elderly parents at home. He was saying, I don't want to isolate myself for 14 days from my parents. I need to actually go take care of them.
Yeah.
And just the issue of, you don't think about that 2-week period, about what's going to happen, who am I going to possibly get in contact with. Yeah, and you don't know. You also probably feel okay at that point.
Right.
Again, we still don't know all those details. Maybe you don't feel okay. Maybe you feel kind of crummy, but who knows?
Yeah, and that's one of those things that's just such a big concern when it comes down to it. So I think canceling it was the right idea, was the right move that they made on that.
But what a storm of activity it will have set off. Because all of these top-tier tech companies, even Samsung, which has already unveiled its biggest stuff, but would still be there to show it off some more.
And likely had some other surprises.
And probably has some more stuff ready to go for us. Maybe smartwatch, we don't know. Anyway, they still have to release their stuff. And let's put production schedules aside and come back. We'll pick that back up. The fact of the matter is they had a launch plan. And these people, as we know, working in tech, they have a meticulous launch plan down to the date, down to the bit of information that they're going to put out, and down to the way they're going to present it, and how many balloons and fireworks there will be when they do it. And their plans are completely scrapped. And these folks are not really great at turning on a dime, especially when you have such elaborate plans. So the tough decision they have right now is, do we go ahead and just send out a press release via email or whatever and let news organizations like ourselves spread the word about their new devices, possibly doing battle with a lot of other people who are putting out press releases about their new devices? Or do they try to lean on their brand power? Take an LG just for an example, who has a big brand recognition, Sony also, and try to stand out from the crowd by just going it alone, maybe letting the dust settle around all this, and then put out their information. Either way, even if they get the news out there, we know what the model number is and what the specs are, and maybe even how much it's going to cost. Nobody got to touch it. None of us, none of the tech journalists and other journalists who are there on the ground, touching the thing, feeling it, telling us how fast it is, how shiny it is, how quick it moves, how compact it is, how well it fits in the pocket, doing AR demonstrations and whatever. We're not going to get any of that. So a lot of the excitement that is generated around these isn't really going to be generated in the same way. Ultimately, they'll send us one, and we'll review it, and we'll show the world, and that might drum up some interest. But this global stage that is CES, that is IFA, that is MWC, has just disappeared. And we're talking about, I don't know what the numbers are, but I can't think of a single other consumer electronic device that is more prevalent and more and has a bigger market share than a smartphone. We all buy them every couple of years, not like TVs or whatever. And they're fairly expensive, and they're very advanced. And man, what a big deal.
Well, we get caught up in the smartphones because those are the face of this. But this is not just a smartphone show. It's a mobile technology show.
Right.
So there's all of the networking companies that make peripherals that are – there's the backbone companies that provide the networks that make everything work. There's also the entire ecosystem that surrounds those. There's the trade associations that make the protocols that make the networking stuff work. So there's a whole host of stuff that goes on there, maybe a little less high profile, but far less likely to get the attention that it was going to get because the journalists just aren't around, the people aren't around, they're not making those contacts. The other half of trade shows, we're talking about the consumer side of it because that's who we are as a company.
Right.
But the other half of it is business-to-business relationships that you just don't get to make.
They'd make a lot of handshake deals that turn into really big partnerships.
Distribution is an important reason that you as a vendor or as a manufacturer go to a show. And if you can't have that conversation, how do you suddenly make that contact?
That's true. That's a whole other side of it that I didn't even think about.
That brings in the production and the delivering side of it. And that's where it hits us the most. It's like, what's the wireless store going to look like in 6 months from now or whatever?
Well, and that comes down to the whole thing of what's going on in China, of how much is manufactured there. Really, so much of it is. And a lot of those factories are shut down right now. The employees are being sent home, because the whole country is, of course, naturally terrified of this virus spreading. So nothing's happening on that end. And the humanitarian side, that's certainly an important issue, but also, we're talking about the tech side and talking about production side. It's not just tech, it's all kinds of things. But on the tech end, this is going to have big ramifications. Or it could anyway, if it's not contained in a quick manner, just because of the fact that everything's going to get delayed.
Yeah, everything. Everything already is delayed.
Yeah.
The Nintendo Switch is delayed, and their new Joy-Con models. Tesla has a manufacturing plant in Shanghai that is being put on hold essentially right now. And it's also hitting Hollywood really hard. It's hitting the box office because they rely on Chinese audiences so much for their numbers. So there's all of these blockbusters coming out on this kind of post-Academy Awards wave that are not going to have audiences coming in.
Yeah, because that's true. That's a big chunk of money.
Huge, yeah.
That comes from that. I think the last time I read, and this was like a week ago, it's like 75,000 theaters were shut down. I'm sure it's way more than that now, at this point.
We're also only able to talk about the things that we know about.
Right.
Part of what happens at a show like this is somebody like ZTE, big smartphone manufacturer in China, is probably preparing to release a phone. Are they you have to think about their schedule here, right? They probably would have been manufacturing it right now in order to have it ready for the release after they announce it in 2 weeks. I don't know the exact dates. I'm just making this all up, of
but
course.
Generally speaking.
But if that plant isn't able to operate right now, maybe that launch gets pushed back and their sales forecast change for the entire year. who knows? This is
Yeah.
all just speculation because we haven't seen those announcements, of course. But there are just profound ramifications for the whole tech industry that we're not really aware of at this point.
Right, yeah, that are still just going to be, the reverberations even from just MWC. It's going to probably be months before we really understand what is going to happen on that side of things. Looking at it too, just a few other things, and I know like this is such a complicated subject, so we're kind of marching through what we know and what we can talk about from our point of view and from our angle on it. But the other thing I was looking at just for the tech world in general were some interesting situations. One of them being like Uber. What Uber was doing, and I don't know if they've continued doing this, but in Mexico they actually they suspended the driving accounts for 2 different drivers and suspended a bunch of different riders who they suspected could have been in a car with somebody who might have had coronavirus. So they kept them from taking other Ubers. They just shut their accounts down. They shut the drivers' accounts down.
No more Uber.
Yeah, so in theory to stop the spread because they think that maybe those people had that. That's a weird move to make. And because that's a tech company, it shows that they know where you are, who you've driven with, who that person drove with, but also, I don't know how do we feel about that kind of privacy?
Don't take Uber pools, I guess.
Yeah, right. I just thought that was a kind of an interesting move on their part. I mean, I guess in theory, it's in the best interest of what they're trying to do something good. But I don't know.
I don't think we've ever heard from taxi companies in the past saying we're not going to have taxis because there's some
No,
pandemic
this is a question of just because you can, should you?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that was the right move on Uber's part. I mean, let's face it, some of that sounds like maybe they were like, oh, well, we'll be praised for trying to help shut down the...
Right.
Some idiot with like some rose-colored glasses decided that was a good idea. And yeah, I personally think it backfired on them. That is not... They lost the trust of their customer base and the people driving the cars for them.
Right.
So that seems like it was a big mistake.
Yeah, if they're not receiving this as like an order or a protocol from a medical official, it seems like it's something that just shouldn't be enforced.
Yeah. It's also showing their hand.
Right.
I mean, I guess we know that they know all this information, but it really brings it to light. It's like, oh yeah, you really know everywhere I'm going and who that person is talking to, and I don't know, there's something a little bit unnerving on that. I'm still going to take an Uber later, but let's be honest, I'm going to. It's convenient.
Necessary
Maybe I'll take
evils.
a Lyft. That's different.
I was on a plane 2 days ago. Woman sitting in the seat next to me was wearing a mask.
Really?
Her boyfriend was not.
Interesting.
So 2 people on either side of her, no mask. She's got a mask on. And it kind of had me freaked out. I was thinking, am I not being protective enough? Am I not thinking about my own safety enough?
Well, good luck getting a mask because I don't know if you heard about this, but I was listening to NPR, full disclosure, and they interviewed the gentleman who runs the biggest and one of the only mask manufacturers and suppliers in the U.S. And they, furnish these masks to, all kinds of health organizations, and also to, your Walgreens and CVS and Walmart and whatever. They're just absolutely massive. And he says that, and he has been saying since 2007, China is going to birth a pandemic, and we're all going to be screwed because we won't we won't be able to make enough masks.
Wow.
And right now, what's going on is China. We're talking about the tech side of the shutdown.
Yeah.
But China is not making masks because they've got no people in the factories, and everybody is still wanting masks, and so they're going to the few places that actually make them, and they're out. Like they have none to give around. And how are you going to decide who you're going to send them to? Do you have people in the U.S. buying them for their families in huge lots and then shipping them overseas? I imagine some are upcharging and some are just doing it as a humanitarian effort.
Yeah.
But at what point do you shut that off and say, I'm sorry, we have to give them to our resident doctors? And it puts him in a very, very difficult situation.
Sure.
Right.
I mean, he's getting, orders in the millions, whereas, in the past he got 0 orders from Asia. And so, I mean, at this point, we could very well run out of masks. If it keeps going, we're not going to have that form of protection for ourselves.
Yeah.
Which makes me a little bit concerned, But
Right.
again, when you talk about supply chain, when you have one place responsible for so much of the supply of the individual parts that go into the bigger things, and that breaks down,
Yeah.
eventually everything's going to shut down. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's really, it's scary. That's why we've got to get a hold on this.
Right. And that's why it's worth talking about and just kind of going into that. I mean, there's so many angles you can go on. I didn't even think about that. There's a shortage of masks.
Well, yeah. Well, we were talking the other day, and this is definitely not in any way to make light of it, but the rise in selling dog masks.
Yeah.
Masks for dogs that prevent, inhalation of, toxic fumes or chemicals, or if there's like pollution in the air.
Wait, that's a
for
thing?
dogs.
It's a thing.
This is a thing.
Yeah.
And sales of these have risen like 300-400% for the companies that make them in like a recent past week.
Yeah. It's just
which is
spiking.
crazy.
Is it are there other pet masks that I'm unaware of?
I don't know.
I
don't
mean,
know about
I don't
the
know. I
cats.
think
Yeah.
this is a.
I don't know about the cat masks.
Are there bird
Little
masks?
small ones for gerbils?
Yeah. I'm not sure how far it goes. Yeah. But it is kind of funny to think about that. And plus people's reactions. I don't think your dog's going to get coronavirus, but
Well,
I guess we don't know. Actually,
know
we
that.
don't
Yeah.
know. We don't know that for sure. So taking a look at that, I guess we've got a few minutes left. So I just want to go and also highlight some of the things that tech is doing good, as far as on the good side of things or ways that it can help. I think as compared to previous viruses, just the state of the internet and the way that we can get information when we get valid information is pretty amazing. There's a dashboard that tracks it all around the world. So you can go there and it'll keep up-to-date numbers as far as what they're being told of where it's been happened, like how many people have cases. Like right now there's 15 people in the US that have it. There's 11 people in France. And then there's 59,826 in mainland China that we know of.
What's the name of the dashboard?
So it's a little bit confusing. It's GIS and data.maps. Okay. It's easier. We've got a whole article at Digital Trends. Actually, that's a good place to go to keep up to date actually with a lot of this information. We've got links to it. Or if you just type in coronavirus dashboard, that'll
What's
bring it
neat
up.
about this, it's built by some epidemiologists at Johns Hopkins University. This is not a new trend, not a new career. I mean, these people have always been around, but the way that technology has progressed such that you can visualize data so easily and effectively and so clearly is fairly new. So they were able to, within a couple of days, aggregate data sources from all around the globe. The epidemiologists in China, the people in the U.S. that are tracking this kind of thing, pull together this dashboard and then present all this information just so we can have some clarity around what's actually happening. I think that's a really important trend.
It is, yeah. So that's another great way. And imagining just what people can do with this, now that this is out there, that kind of data. And then another thing I thought was pretty interesting, this is actually being used in Seattle. There were a couple of cases, is robotic doctor assistants. There's one in Seattle and there's another one, another place, and I apologize, I don't remember what it was, but in order to keep the doctors from getting infected and the nurses that are working with this, there's somebody who was diagnosed with it and they've got them isolated, but you still have to take vitals. You still have to take, measurements and understand what's going on with them, and he needs something to do that. So they've got a robotic control that can go over there and take their vitals, and they can communicate directly back and forth. There's a little screen on it so the person can see the doctor, so it doesn't feel completely like a robot's probing you. But it's yeah, I mean it is though. But that's that's something I think that's another good use of technology, and that maybe going forward you could see more use cases.
This is so with the rise of 5G, that's one of the things that they always cite is that telemedicine, right? Telepresence, robotics, etc. And I think the angle with 5G has always been surgery by a robot, not just standard GP practice stuff. But here we see a very real world application of that exact thing. Yeah, this is it felt kind of futuristic when we're talking about 5G. And you're going to have some surgeon that's going to take out that goiter or your gallbladder or whatever it is.
Right.
Maybe not a goiter. But
Goiter. Wow.
Goiter.
I went right there for the goiter. But seriously though, now we actually see the real world application of this. Here's a very real thing. So that is a very meaningful change. Yeah, a positive change using technology. Yeah. So I mean, you have to think, and also just thinking about with artificial intelligence, just how much data that maybe that's the future to snuffing these things out in the beginning, or estimating where something's going to happen or when it's going to happen. Because surely there's some use case for that, I would think. Anyway.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking about
the
5G goiter and bunion removal. We got all your goiters and bunions taken care of over here.
It's a very special robot that handles that.
Did the 5G cause the goiter, or is it removing the goiter?
Don't start.
I know.
That's where we got to go with that one. All right. I don't know where we go after robot goiters, but the bottom line is it's a complicated issue, and we just wanted to talk about it and give you our opinions. And there's so much, it's so big. And we've got all the information at digitaltrends.com as far as what we're covering. But naturally, there's a vast world of ramifications of this out there. But that's what I think we just kind of wanted to do, is just give a little bit of opinion and let you know how big this thing is. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, what a ripple effect it's causing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the right way to say it.
And if you've seen something that's interesting that we haven't highlighted here on the show,
Yeah.
please do write in. Let us
Yes.
know about it. We'd like to highlight some more things, especially areas where technology is really helping to move the needle forward and solve this
100%.
difficult situation.
Yeah. Definitely some great ways. And, we'll leave you with robot goiters. But otherwise, thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, this is Trends with Benefits. So this is our weekly podcast here. Each week's a different episode. Usually we go into something a lot more, on the tech side of things, but this naturally affects all of us. So it's a very important topic this week. So thanks for tuning in. Hit subscribe. Get the back episodes of the show. We'll be back next week with another episode of Trends with Benefits.
What about the bunions, though?
The bunny.
Well, what
forgot
about the bunions? The bunions are self-caused, right? Bad shoes?
This is why actually, believe it or not, I have a hard time eating Funyuns.
Because it rhymes with
sounds like
rhymes
bunions.
with Funyuns, and I'm just like, huh.
Now we all do that.